There are things that I like being right, but there's sometimes that I wish that I wasn't. Yesterday, report comes out. We, the United States, are leaving Iraq. Now, I reported this story. A letter was sent to the Prime Minister of Iraq, essentially saying, we respect your sovereignty. Sir, in deference to the sovereignty of the Republic of Iraq, and as requested by the Iraqi Parliament and the Prime Minister, CJTF/OIR will be repositioning forces over the course of the coming days and weeks to prepare for onward movement. Read a letter from the United States Marine Corps Brigadier General William H. Seeley III, the commanding general of Task Force Iraq. We respect your sovereign decision to order our departure. That's fascinating considering the United States has not been respecting Iraqi sovereignty on multiple points, whether it was the invasion of Iraq, killing, 1 million Iraqis, whether it was these recent, 1, Trump intruding into Iraq, meaning jumping into the country, 2, the killing and the bombings, 25 people associated with a militia that was under the military or the auspices of the Iraqi military, even though there were elements of it that was supposedly pushed by Iran, or the killing of Soleimani. All of these things were complete and utter ignoring, as if it did not exist at all, any notion of Iraqi sovereignty. So this letter was somewhat mind-blowing that they're sending it saying, you know what? Parliament decided that they wanted us to go, so we are going to go. We're going to respect your sovereignty. No, we flagrantly ignored it. All of these other instances, but in this particular case, if you ask us to go, we're going to leave. Now, my question was always, if Iraqi government, the government that the United States put together with its own hands after killing a large number of people, if that Iraqi government comes together and says, you need to go, the Prime Minister has said it, the Parliament has said it, now Parliament has put a non-binding resolution telling the U.S. military that they need to go. And why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? I said in that video, and you can go back and look, watch. I said, Trump can rescind this in a heartbeat. I'll believe it when I see it. I've heard these things, these proclamations that we're leaving a particular area far too many times. We're leaving Syria, but yeah, we're going to leave people there to steal the oil. Then you're not really leaving Syria. You're stealing the oil from that country. Today, and not even today, a few hours after this letter that Reuters verified was legit, a few days after, a few hours after, a rebuke of this letter comes into play. Now, the rebuke of this letter basically makes the point that this was a mistake. This letter was a draft, wasn't signed, wasn't meant to be sent. Wasn't meant to be sent. Now, this is confusing, as you would think, because people are like, wait a minute, how do you make a mistake like that? You sent a letter to the prime minister of that country, well, interim prime minister. He's on his way out. He essentially resigned because of the protest that was taking place in Iraq before the bombings, before all of the stuff that brought the stuff to the precipice. That prime minister essentially was laid out in a rail based on the protests and the killings that was taking place in regards to the protesters and the government. But Parliament could ask the U.S. to leave. They just haven't. At least not officially. A few hours, the military comes out and says, that's wrong. Essentially said that's wrong. The Pentagon says that's a mistake. And their point is, a draft was accidentally sent to the prime minister of the country. Right here. That letter is a draft. That letter is a mistake. It was unsigned. It should never have been released. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley told reporters at the Pentagon on Monday. Poorly worded implies withdrawal, Milley said. That's not what's happening, he continued. Mike Esper told reporters early in the day that the U.S. was repositioning forces throughout the region. The problem here is that the letter says onward movement, and we're respecting sovereignty, would get you cause very clear impression that they are leaving. It's pretty clear. They're saying that's not true. They're saying that's not true. The question that looms, that lingers, if the Iraqi parliament, democratically elected parliament of Iraq, comes together and tells the United States that they need to leave, not just a non-binding resolution, but an actual declaration of legal will of that population, I got to be honest, I don't know how the U.S. believes it can stay. Or at the very least, I don't know how it believes it can stay with the friendship of Iraq in that process, as opposed to just being a domineering, occupying force. You flagrantly invaded the sovereignty of that country. The people in that country are prodigiously angry with you, not to mention you've murdered 1 million of them when you went into that war in the first place based on something that wasn't even real. So it's astonishing to me that these guys are like, yeah, we have no plans on leaving. We have no plans on leaving. So look, I have no doubt that they were pressuring the prime minister and whatnot. The problem here is that the public is massively pissed off. And that massively pissed off public is not going to accept this notion of their elected leaders being okay with America being there and occupied. I could be wrong, but this non-binding resolution will at some point become binding. And the question that looms and that lingers is, will the United States leave if asked to go? If Trump is in office, that answer might be no. I want to leave this here. I just wanted to give an update on this story because I covered this story yesterday. This is going to be a late night at the soapbox. This was an extremely long day. As you see, the studio is still sparse, so we're still setting up the studio, or I'm still setting up the studio. And just complications in making the move. However, everything that I planned on getting done today got done despite the will that it took and fortitude to get it done. So fair enough, I feel great. And we will have a late night on the soapbox. I just wanted to give an update on what is taking place. By the way, just so we're clear, Donald Trump no longer has control of this situation or this foreign policy. At the various instances, he could pull himself from the brink. So he decides to go with this notion of a pressure campaign. All right, well, Iran doesn't buckle because what Trump doesn't entirely understand is that Iran has no leeway to negotiate with Trump while he's putting on sanctions. That's essentially acting under duress. No country would action and function in that way. On the other point, after the sacking of the embassy, the killing of Soleimani, Iran has no choice but to respond to this. Now, what that means is, depending on their response, and I've just seen recently they shot missiles, depending on their response and what that response does and entails, he's automatically forced to respond. Now, the catch becomes whether or not it causes any damage, whether or not it causes any injury, the very act that they did it. It's almost like the challenge in and of itself, regardless of whether or not the challenge actually draws blood, is the issue. It is unclear on... Look, Iran doesn't want a full-blown war. They do have to respond to this. The response is going to be proportional in some way, in some measure, to the killing of the General Soleimani. He was a statesman. There were millions of people at that funeral. It gets across that the public wants action. The public has been solidified around this notion of backing their government in the face of what they consider to be aggression. Blanket, rank, naked aggression. Trump is going to fail in this. Either, I said it on more than one occasion, either Trump backs off or Trump gets a war. It doesn't matter what Trump wants. The pressure campaign was always going to fail. And at some point, either you back away from the pressure campaign or you go all in. It doesn't matter what he wants. You can't dance on the head of a needle in this one. Ultimately, one action after the next at some point is going to be pushed back upon in a quid pro quo. Well, sometimes people forget the fact that the quid came before the quo. And it becomes this back and forth with one side escalating because one side believes that the other side needs to accept it's stronger and not respond. It's nonsense. They will respond. They don't have a choice to respond. This is politics. Weakness is not necessarily something that's prized in a standpoint of a government. If a government can't protect its people and can't protect its interests, then that government is going to have problems. Iranian people are going to be looking to the Iranian government to respond in some form and fashion. The catch becomes, what is that response? And what is Donald Trump's response after that response? And what is the Iranian response after that response? You tell me. Like, share, subscribe. We're at the brink of a war. And, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. You can think of it yourself. Iran responds. They just did. They shot missiles. What does Trump do? Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets killed. Doesn't matter. What does Trump do? Fact is, nobody was hurt and killed at that embassy either. Just to make a point. And when that drone was shot out of the sky, what did the United States say? Or what did the people around Trump say? You need to strike Iran. You need to strike Iran. Everybody in his ears telling him to strike Iran. And at one point, after the next, he kept pulling back. And I've said on more than one occasion, at some point, you're not going to be able to pull back. Here we are. You just crossed the line. They will respond. The question becomes, do you respond after they respond? In which case, they will also respond again. In which case, the question becomes, do you respond again after they respond? At which point does this just continue to escalate? And what's fair? What's just? What's proportional? How do you quantify those things in regards to a particular response? All of that stuff gets somewhat dicey. And look, the First World War was started with people sleepwalking into that war. Nobody thought all of these people in some weird way were related, almost like bloodlines. And nevertheless, here we are. You still had that fight. Don't sleep on this. Trump is your president. He can sleepwalk you into a war. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.